listeners to the Mindful Living podcast, where we pause, reflect, and create space for conversations that matter. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever pushed through physical pain with a smile? I have. Ignored that nagging tightness in your shoulders or that chronic fatigue that just won't go away. Telling yourself, it keeps on happening, I'm just fine, I'm feeling good. I have done that, to be honest. Well, we live in a world that glorifies speed, hustle, and productivity. But what if healing actually begins the moment we slow down? Now, listeners, today's guest is here to show us a radically different path. Meet Dr. Brittney Hobbs. Dr. Brittney is not your typical pharmacist. She is a somatic soul guide and wellness consultant who helps high achieving women decode pain, fatigue, and tension, not just with science, but with deep energetic wisdom and somatic presence. Her work invites us to stop outsourcing healing and start listening to the intelligent language of our bodies. And this is not about managing symptoms, this is about understanding the messages beneath them. So let's explore how presence, not performance, is the gateway to real transformation. So, Dr. Brittany, I'm truly, truly honored to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and talking about this topic that's near and dear to my heart.
Wonderful, wonderful. Hey, Dr. Brittany, while I was doing the intro, one thing that really, this is something I recently very much learned about in so many of my conversations that our bodies, not literally, but they are kind of, so much sophisticated and magical. Our bodies have the potential to heal, but then we have to, as a soul, as a human, we have to give our bodies that allowance. So that is something that really has stuck with me. For since the first time I did that conversation with another one of my guests on mindful living, that's exactly what I guess our listeners will also connect with. So you often say that chronic pain isn't random. So for someone who is hearing that for the first time, what does that mean? I mean, how can we begin to decode what our body is really trying to tell us?
Yeah. So, what I have learned over the past almost 15 years of working with people living with chronic pain is, a lot of times it does feel random, like you mentioned, but it normally is a buildup over an entire lifetime and even over generations. What I have learned and what the science is also starting to show is that our body is actually a living library, that it holds every life experience that we have ever had, and it
Mm,
even holds the memories of several generations back as well. So, some of our responses or our reactions in life and in our body may not even be from our own lived experience, which is why we can't logically solve this puzzle, because we don't have all of the pieces in our conscious, like, everyday mind,
mhm,
and and that's where we need to go into that presence in that somatic experience because, again, it's not a logical thing, it's when we slow down and we just take this moment to be like, "Hey, body, I know we're on the same side, I'm here with you," and that sense of safety allows kind of those locks to come open so that
mhm,
things can start rising up and we can then have conscious awareness to it, which
mhm.
allows the body to be like, "And now we can start this healing process." But we have to have consciousness and presence linked to it. Otherwise, our body just keeps it locked up tight, and that feels like that tension and that fatigue, right? If we're constantly keeping our muscles locked down like armor against the world,
Mhm.
that in and of itself creates a lot of exhaustion, right? Um,
That's right. That's right. And I really so much agree, when you mentioned that our body is a living library, of experiences, events, whether it's traumatic or, good experiences. And whenever we as an entirety, we are in distress, our bodies, they exhibit signs. Sometimes we are not able to recognize, and we see or we resort to a quicker fix or a treatment, but we oftentimes ignore the root cause of that. um, and that this really challenges the way most of us were taught to view pain as something to fix or silence or suppress. So I really admire how you frame it.
yeah, and pain is hard. It hurts a lot and it impacts so much of our life that it has become this normal human instinct that if we have pain, like there is something broken or that needs to be fixed in the body. But that's if we, twist our ankle or break our arm or have, some sort of acute event, but when pain hangs around for a long time or it shows up without any obvious injury or accident, or illness, then we have to start looking at other at other places. And the way that we're all having these responses, they just show up in different ways for different people. For some people, that might be anxiety. For others, that might be depression. And for others, that shows up as pain. And even with that, it shows up very differently. One person might have, you know, gut issues or upset stomach frequently. Another person might have migraines. Another person might have lower back pain, and it's that's why we have to have such a unique response to what is going on in our body and know that it's not a quick fix or it's not suppressing the symptoms with medications or procedures because our body's just gonna get louder because it has something to say and it's trying to get your attention to spend time with it so that you and your body can work together to get to the root of it like you were mentioning.
That's really empowering. It is empowering. And you talk about nervous system dysregulation being at the root of fatigue and burnout. So for all of us, if you can explain how this happens, even let's say we are eating right, we are doing all the right wellness practices.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, there's such a huge emphasis on wellness in our society that a lot of us can have, especially if we live with pain, can have perfectionistic tendencies where, okay, if I do this right, and if I do this right, and if I do that right, then that's going to all add up and equal me being completely healthy and well and living the best life. And within that, that can create a lot of stress or shame, right? If we have a day where we don't get all of those things right, or we choose to eat this food instead of that food, or we choose to, stay up late, or a lot of stress comes up at work, then that can trigger a lot of shame, or it it at least creates this sense of hypervigilance of watching for everything that we should be doing right or that we're not doing wrong. And if we think about hypervigilance, that in and of itself creates a sense of underlying danger that if we don't do this correctly, that's going to have bad implications within our system. And in living in that state of being, it creates this heightened stress, and our nervous system is 100% responsible on determining whether we're going to have pain or not, and that comes down to Do we feel safe or do we not feel safe? And it's not a conscious decision. Similar to how we don't have to think about what our heart is doing in order for it to beat at all the different rates it needs to beat at, depending on what our activity level is. And that same system is interpreting everything coming at it from what we listen to, what we see, what we do, all these different things and all of our life experiences. And in every given moment, it's making this decision: are we safe or are we not safe? And from there, it determines in what language within our body is it going to speak to us to let us know what its determination was.
I think that can be especially for someone who is very much new to this. It can be really overwhelming, but I think it definitely, step by step, the small steps, it can be really, really so much therapeutic and healing to understand. And that is really powerful because, especially for women, um, I mean, it's not some kind of, generic overview, but I feel like they're feeling at self care. But it's not failure, it's just a mismatch or like a misalignment between what they need and what they're doing.
Yeah, and it can be overwhelming, but I think something really simple
Mhm.
that can be profound that we can do is just taking a simple 30 seconds whenever you can think about it or whenever it can be programmed into your phone as a reminder to just check in, and this real check in of, okay, starting to feel into our body. Where do I feel tension, or what is my breath doing? Am I holding it, or is it shallow and quick, slow and deep? What am I feeling underneath all of that? Can I name that feeling or that emotion? And just doing that simple little thing every day or a few times a day, like before we get out of our car to walk into work, or before we go to bed at night, or while we're brushing our teeth. This simple little check in starts to cultivate this really deep connection with our body. And together, we can start learning, what is that language of our body? How can I catch these different things that tend to build up over my day before they become, you know, a painful sensation?
That that makes sense. And you also say, Dr. Brittany, that you can't outsource your body's reset. And that's a bold statement. So, what are some common ways women try to outsource healing? And what does it look like to take that power back?
So what I think about is passive versus active treatment. And I feel like so many of us have been conditioned in today's healthcare systems to go to a complete stranger and in a 15-minute visit, expect that person to be able to write a prescription or make a diagnosis or, recommend a procedure to fix whatever it is that we have going on. And again, that works really well when something is acute or, an injury or an accident. But when so many of our chronic conditions, including pain, are a culmination of a lifetime's, and even before this lifetime, right, of experiences, we can't expect somebody to be able to figure that out. They can offer a temporary suppression, but what I also think about, because I'm a very visual person, so, I think about passive treatment as, if we have a body of stagnant water, like a pond, for example, and it's got all of its fish in it and its ducks and plant life, and there's a whole bunch of stuff, but there's nothing fresh going into it. And if we expect, a healthcare practitioner to do something to us, like give us a medication or a procedure of some kind, we're just shifting or adding to what that stagnant water is doing versus if we are active and we choose little baby steps of or little shifts of things to do, then I think of that as, if snow's melting on the mountaintop, this little drip of this little change happening then connects with other drips that turns into a little stream that then flows into a bigger river that then goes into the big wide ocean. And in that starts again with those little tiny shifts that we do in our day-to-day life. So, for instance, like that 30-second check-in of feeling into our body, of slowing down and really being present of what am I feeling right now is the start of that little drip that eventually accumulates and leads to this gigantic body of water called the ocean, which we can think of as our health and wellness. So, to kind of summarize, we have to be a part of the shift and bring it into our day to day in order for things to really change inside our body and how we respond to the world.
Wow, that was really, really, uh, such a simple yet such a beautiful visualization of that, entire process. Wow. Wow. Okay. So, before we wrap up, Dr. Brittany, um, you mentioned about, our bodies being the living libraries. We carry so much of our generational information. It can be traumatic or maybe the good experiences as well. So, inherited trauma and stored generational pain, they're often overlooked. And this is something I connect with it. And I believe so many of our listeners will as well. So, how do you approach healing patterns that may go back like three, four, and even seven generations back?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, it's something that I help support women with when they work with me in some of my containers, but some let's see. I think the thing to really keep in mind is that our mind really wants the answers and wants it to be this picture that we can fully understand. But what our body just needs us to do is needs us to be still and be with it and allow things to come up. And so, some of the ways that I see this happening is in in being with the sensations. Stories can pop up into our mind, which sounds phenomenal, but it is truly a magical thing to witness. Or if we say, I'm really moved by music. So when I'm moving things in my own body, I might put on a certain playlist that I then just sit or gently dance with my body. And emotions come up, and a lot of times my mind wants to try to figure out, "Why am I feeling this way?" And I just say, "We don't need to have those answers right now, we just need to feel the feels." And so we just need to allow ourselves to be in these spaces where we feel safe and hold this compassion of, "I don't need to have the answers. I don't need to fix this. I just need to be here and feel it and know that I'm perfectly safe to feel it." And that could be that we need to be there to witness and allow grief or anger to come up and move through our body. And, those are just the first two emotions that come up. But we just have to have that presence and tune into these different parts of our body, that might be holding tension or might be holding pain or whatever sensation is coming up and allow ourselves to just open up and be there with no agenda with it except to be there and hold that space. And in that, then that generational trauma or these patterns can come up and be witnessed, and then they move along, and it opens up and creates this whole sense of spaciousness in our body. And I wanna say that that happens every time, that spaciousness, but I think the main point is we can't have any sort of agenda. We just need to be present with what comes up in those moments that we carve out for ourselves. This, like, the soul to body connection.
Hmm. That's fascinating. That's fascinating. Great, great. So for a woman listening right now, or for anyone, but especially for women who is feeling numb, disconnected, or maybe overwhelmed in her own body, where does she begin, Dr. Brittany? I mean, what's the first step towards presence, but without fear?
Yeah, and that's such a personal question because 'cause we're all in such different places. Um, so what I think is the most important place to start is that again, coming back to that foundational check-in, it seems overly simple, but it's frequently just because it's there's that saying that just because it's simple doesn't mean that it's easy, right? And I know so many of us, myself included from time to time, we want to do everything we can to fix ourselves without having to be completely present with ourselves, because there is this sense of fear or worry out of what's coming up, or am I doing this right, or all of these senses of self-doubt, or again, perfectionistic tendencies. I don't have time for this. But that's the most important piece, is that carving out, and maybe it's even just starting out with 10 seconds, that you're tuning into, your rear end connecting with the chair or your feet on the ground, and we're starting to drop out of our head space that we spend the majority of our time. And how can I start to just feel my clothing on my skin, and or following my breathing. One thing that I really like to do is, as I breathe in and out through my nose, can I
Mhm.
feel the cool air coming in, and can I notice that subtle change in temperature to warmer as it comes out of my nose? And again, that's just this practice of really tuning into something other than our mind, which I feel almost all of us need as much practice with that as we can get. And as we practice that, it gets easier and easier to be with ourselves, and then that gives our body more and more permission to open up that library that it's holding and allow us to know and peruse what's going on inside of it.
Absolutely. Wow. And if our listeners they would like to connect with you, Dr. Brittany, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so I have my website, which is brittneyhobbs.com. Um, and that's BrittneyHobbs.com. And then on Instagram at Brittney.Hobbs. And then if anybody feels called, as a thank you, I would love to offer any of your listeners a 10% discount for any of my containers, to work with me deeper and have some really gentle guidance in implementing this and really getting to the patterns and the codes, and to unlock those deeper for your women listeners.
Absolutely. That's so, so generous. And I'll make sure to have the links and the details in the show notes for all of our listeners, including the discount and everything. And Dr. Brittany, thank you so much, for, I guess, this itself is such a profound conversation. And it reminds us that the body isn't a battlefield, it is a compass. And healing doesn't always look like doing more, but rather becoming more and more present. So, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for having me here and in hosting this conversation.
And to all the mindful listeners out there, if you have been living on autopilot, ignoring the whispers of your body, maybe today is the day you pause just for a moment, 30 seconds maybe, and ask what am I really feeling? And what is this sensation asking of me? Not to fix, but to listen. Because present isn't passive, it is power. And thank you so much for joining us on the Mindful Living. Do connect with Dr. Brittany and refer to the show notes along with this episode on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, slow down, tune in, and live gently. This is your host, Sana, signing off. Thank you.